Greetings viewer, this week we're driving the Mazda MX-30 in dismal winter conditions. It's super cold outside, but I'm going to give you a quick exterior overview of the car, then we're gonna check the interior, and then finally we're gonna take it for a drive. The MX-30 is Mazda's first real attempt at making a fully electric car. It is a very trendy crossover that also happens to be a coupe-like crossover, and it actually looks really good. It has this elongated hood and this brow detail here that is really quite interesting, and the headlights are typical Mazda. They are full LED as standard, although you can opt for matrix LED lights. From the side, it's clear that Mazda wanted this to be one of the new trendy coupe-like crossovers with this sloping fastback rear end that does eat into headroom a little bit, but it makes the car feel, well, sportier, look sportier actually. What's also interesting is how Mazda chose to give this car 4 actual doors. So the front doors are normal, they open like this, but the rear doors are rear hinged, and they reveal a back seat where I have placed all of my camera gear. It's fairly usable, but really tall adults will struggle for space. Now, even though the front end is quite dramatic, I think the most dramatic part of this car's design is the rear end, with this very sloped rear glass area that makes it look like a fastback, with this aluminium style detail here with the Mazda inscription. The rear lights are also really interesting. They have a Ferrari-esque vibe to them, I think, and they are really boldly integrated into the rear end with this swoopy detail here. All in all, I think this is a very good looking car. I think it is one of the better looking crossovers that you can buy right now. The trunk is not massive, but even though this is a car that will also be sold with an internal combustion powertrain, the fact that its boot is this big is pretty impressive. It's just under 400 liters. It is ridiculously cold, and now I am going to go inside, show you the interior, and then we'll take the car for a drive. Step inside the MX-30 and you are greeted by a little bongy bong, as well as a lot of dark plastic. You can get the MX-30 with a lighter themed interior, but this one is the darker one, and on a miserable cloudy day like today, it feels a bit dingy, but it's the design itself is really good, and probably on a nice summer's day it would look a lot better. The steering wheel is standard Mazda. The top of the dash is clad in decently soft material. The gauges are also standard Mazda with the digital screen in the center and the 2 analog dials to the side. On the left you have the charge power meter, while on the right you have the state of charge, as well as the battery temperature meter, which is something you don't normally see in EVs. And what's amusing is that both meters on the right are analog. It's amusing that you have analog dials for such a digital car doing digital things. The material here on top of the doors, as well as on the rear door cards, is made from recycled materials, and it looks really interesting. Some people might not like it, but I do. Another interesting material choice is the use of cork. Yes, the thing you use to seal wine bottles. Apparently, before it started making cars, Mazda was in the cork business. And you can see the material used all throughout the lower part of the center console, like for these 2 lids here that hide the cup holders, as well as this tray underneath the center console where there's a lot of free room. And you also have 2 USB ports there, as well as a standard 12-volt charging port. that you used to call a cigarette lighter. Unlike in other Mazdas though, the climate controls in this car are part digital and part analog. For one reason or another, Mazda decided to offer duplicate controls right next to one another. So for instance, if you want to adjust the temperature, you have the physical button and then the duplicate right on screen right next to it, like 3 centimeters away. And the same goes for the fan speed setting. Some of the controls are strictly limited to the screen, like directing where the air goes, the heated seats and heated steering wheel. The latter is not present in this car, but you can spec it. The shifter feels unusual at first because for park you have to put it all the way up and then to the left, and then if you want to put it in drive you have to press the button release on the left of the shifter itself and then pull it to the right and then down for D. This is like in older American cars where you had to cycle through all the gears. And for instance, if somebody put their car in park at a set of traffic lights and then they put it in D again, you would see the rear lights flashing briefly if you were behind them. This is what this does as well. Mazda is particularly proud of the fact that this interior is almost free of animal products. So this brown leather here is not actually leather, and it's surprisingly good for something artificial. It does a good job of fooling you that it's actual leather, although there's still actual leather on the steering wheel and on the shifter thing here. Sitting in this car is actually quite pleasant. The armrest, which you can slide forward, is in a great position and it makes things very comfortable. The shifter position is also very comfortable with this raised console. The climate controls are within very easy reach. The infotainment screen is not a touch screen, but you can operate it through these controls here. They are quite BMW-like, but they are still good. I don't mind them. The infotainment itself is pretty simple and straightforward, but it's also competent in that it doesn't lag. It gives you pretty much all the information you need. The graphics are good. The menus aren't excessively complicated and convoluted like they are in some other cars. It's a good, competent infotainment system. I wouldn't call it the best on the market, but it's not bad either, to be honest. If you don't like the infotainment though, you'll be happy to note that this car does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and they work very well. I also really like the driving position. This car has electrically adjustable driver's seat, which you can get really low, and the base also tilts. So if you want better upper leg support from the seat base, you can adjust it to get that, and it's really good. Also, the window sills are quite high, and this makes you feel like you're sitting in the car instead of on it, which for some crossovers is a big problem. But the MX-30 doesn't have it. Sitting in the back can be problematic for taller adults, but shorter people should be fine, even on longer journeys, although this car can't really handle longer journeys because of its battery capacity, but we'll get to that soon. However, it is worth pointing out that this car's unusual rear door setup, which is like that of a BMW i3 or the Mazda RX-8, does mean there's less glass than you would expect when looking over your shoulder. Because where you would expect to find a single pane of glass, it's actually split into two and there's a big pillar in the middle. And the B pillar is pushed quite far forward, although it's not a B pillar per se, because it's actually just the rear door. That's where the seat belt hangs from. That's where the door handle is. Anyway, the car also has a brilliant head-up display, which is both clear and bright, and it's not one of those cheap ones that's displayed on a separate plastic screen. This one is directly displayed on the windscreen, and it's gorgeous. It's a really good HUD. I have to say that I'm also generally very impressed by the quality inside the Mazda MX-30. it almost feels like a premium vehicle. Sure, some of the materials aren't quite as good as you'd expect them, but sitting in here, the ambiance is really nice. You can also get an optional opening panoramic sunroof, which would probably go a long way towards making this interior feel less claustrophobic. The Mazda MX-30 is quite a low-range EV by modern standards. Its 35-ish kilowatt-hour battery pack has a usable capacity of just 30 kilowatt-hours, and this results in a claimed WLTP range of just 200 kilometers, which in winter will be ridiculously hard to achieve. I tried doing a range test, a highway range test, where I drove the car constantly at 70 miles per hour. I did that for inside EVs, and I nearly got it to 140 kilometers, which isn't that great, to be honest. Mazda says that putting such a small battery pack in this car was a conscious choice. They could have fitted it with a larger battery pack, but they chose this one for several reasons. One, it's easier to recycle at the end of the car's life. Another reason why this car has a small battery pack, according to Mazda, is to keep its weight down. It tips the scales at 1.7 tons, so it's not excessively heavy, and I do enjoy driving this car. It feels like it has a very low center of gravity, it's super planted, and it's just a joy to drive. I think I like it even more than the lower, theoretically sportier Mazda 3, and I drove that with a 182 horsepower engine. And I honestly have more fun driving this. And I can't really believe that I'm saying this, but it's the truth. Between the low and sporty driving position, the nice pickup from the electric motor, and the sharp steering and decent body control, this is actually quite an enjoyable vehicle to drive. The electric motor is located in the front under the hood, and it leaves a lot of room. Like you could make some sort of usable frunk in there if you really wanted to. I'm not sure why Mazda chose not to do that and leave that space unused. But it could have increased this car's practicality. There's so much space under the hood because in Japan, Mazda sells this car with an internal combustion engine. Mazda will eventually also launch a range extender version of this car, and that will coincide with its US launch, because currently the MX-30 is not available in the US. The electric motor it has under the hood right now makes 145 horsepower, 270 Newton meters of torque, and it sends the car to 100 kilometers per hour from standstill in 9.7 seconds. And none of these are impressive numbers, but at the same time, the car doesn't really feel sluggish. Yeah, it's not the latest word in acceleration and performance, but it's not bad, and it does get out of its own way, and it sprints quite nicely and cleanly all the way to its limited top speed of 140 kilometers per hour. And whenever you accelerate, you also hear the sound that is pumped into the cabin, which sounds like this. It's kind of a spaceship whooshing type of sound, but there's also a little bit of burble in there. It's clearly engineered, and it's actually quite enjoyable. I don't hate it. I haven't driven a Porsche Taycan, sadly, but from what I've heard in videos, this Mazda sound is actually quite close to that. This car has 5 levels of brake regeneration, and you can choose your regen setting by pulling either of the 2 pedals located behind the steering wheel. Pull the left pedal twice and you engage maximum regen mode. You can kind of drive the car with 1 pedal, although even in its most severe setting, it's not quite as strong as in some other cars. But if you give yourself some leeway and don't drive really close to the car in front, you can definitely mostly 1 pedal drive this car. The first part of the pedal travel, the brake pedal travel, is still regen at first. And you notice this by looking at the charge meter. because even with full regen on and your foot off the gas, it will not go all the way down, so it's not charging as much as it could. Yet if you apply a little bit of brake, it goes all the way down, so you're essentially regenning as much as it can. Another area where this car betrays its internal combustion engine car roots is in the fact that it has a transmission tunnel running through the center. So the floor in the rear is not flat, and that means that a center passenger in the rear would be even more uncomfortable than the other two. But at least there's an armrest with cup holders to suggest that that space should be reserved for passengers' elbows and their drinks and not another person. My tester today costs 33,000 euros. And with the generous government grant, that's nearly 10,000 euros in Romania, you can essentially get this car for 23,000 euros. And even if this car isn't a top-of-the-range model, it has plenty of kit on it. The sporty black headliner, part leather seats, electric driver's seat, part digital instrument cluster, the competent infotainment, an onboard charger of up to 6.6 kilowatts, single zone air conditioning, heated seats. This car is definitely appealing. It looks really good. It feels good to drive. It's a city car. It's not huge, so you will be able to navigate traffic jams with it, and as well as the occasional curb and pothole and sleeping policeman. It's not the longest range electric vehicle on the market, but then again, other manufacturers have gone down this route and they are trying to own it, like Honda with the Honda E, that has a similar battery capacity and range to this car. But all in all, I genuinely think this is a very likable car. I like it more than I thought I was going to, primarily because it just drives so really well. And it's not that expensive. You can check out my highway range test video in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. Until the next one, thank you for watching and take care.